Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Jen Sugarmeyer, your host of Mindset in the Morning, and we are here live 5 days a week at 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. But because this is YouTube, you can tune in whenever you would like. And the reason I get up at dark 100 to be here at 6 a.m. every single morning is because we should be exercising our mental muscle in the morning before we get out there for the day and get going, so that when we are basically playing the game of life, that we've warmed up and we're ready for the play. It's just like anybody that's out playing sports. What do? They warm up before they go out on the field, and they have a coach to help them out. So Mindset in the Morning is all about getting warmed up, having a coach showing you another perspective so that you've got options as you're going out there and you're playing the game of life. So we are here live again, 5 days a week, 6 a.m. Central Standard Time. Would love if you would also share this with your friends. But first, before we get started today, if you would hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And today we are going to be talking about expectations. Ooh, expectations. Yeah, they can be tough. It's hard when others have this expectation on us. And I think for so many of us, we find ourselves chasing this idea of what others expect of us. And I've done this for years, and it can come in so many different forms. It's people expect me to look a certain way, so I look and I act and I dress a certain way. I know when I went into the office, I sort of had this corporate Jen. And then when I was home, I had this non-corporate Jen. And I do think to some degree there are going to be variations because you're in an office, you're around other people. It kind of makes sense. But it felt very two different worlds because you're supposed to act a certain way. It's like going into church. I think all of a sudden some people just don't sin anymore. Well, that's a lie. That's a lie. And I know for me, I've personally struggled with being around people that, oh well, I don't sin. Well, that's the lie. Everybody does. And we shame that. And so having this expectation over us that you don't sin or that you have to be perfect, or you're maybe it's your boss that has these expectations on you, or your kids or your family, or I mean they're coming from all different directions. Your friends expect you to be there for all the events, or your family expects you to do all the things, and all of a sudden you look around and you think, oh my gosh, this is a lot to deal with. There are expectations everywhere. And it's really easy for us to form them in our own minds and for other people to have expectations on us. But the truth is, when there are expectations on us, it can lead us down a road of resentment. You start resenting people because they've put this pressure, they've put this idea, this opinion on you, and you may not have even had a say in what that opinion is. So we're left with just feeling this guilt, this resentment, and often it impacts our self-esteem. So if we aren't adding up to whatever these expectations are, if we're not able to meet them, then we start to feel, am I good enough? Am I worthy enough? Do I bring value to the table? So today we're going to talk about why expectations on ourselves from others is not a good thing to have. We're going to talk through that, and then we're going to talk about how do we let go of them, because they absolutely have an impact on our lives. So we're going to walk through all of those, and then how do we let them go? How do we manage them and learn to kind of loosen up a little bit, so that as we come across all of these expectations, that we can stand in our own power? Because that's where we want to be. We want to be standing in who we are and being true and authentic to ourselves. All right. So first and foremost, if there are other expectations on you and you are living to those expectations, You are not being true and authentic to you. You see, the truth is, there are 8 billion people in this world, and you probably come across, I don't know, let's say 20 to 30. Let's say 20. You come across 20 on a daily basis through work, your family. I'd say that's a good number for some. That may be a little high for you, maybe a little low for you. I don't know. Let's say about 20. That's a lot of people to have different opinions. You are never going to get a consensus. You just aren't. Expectations come from people's past, from their backgrounds. I was having a conversation with someone yesterday and they were talking about how they manage in the office. And it and they said that it's so easy to get caught in the mindset of what would I do? What would I do in this situation? And so because we know ourselves, often we say, well, then we expect that from you. Well, if I can do this, you can do this. That doesn't account for the other person's skills, abilities, desires, wants, beliefs. You see, when the person told me yesterday, I think about what would I do? That is strictly about that person. And what built into what would I do? Their beliefs, their values, their morals, their background, their, growing up, their religion, their culture. All of these things are based off of this individual's experience, which is going to differ from this individual's experience. We are all going to have different experiences. So when somebody has expectations on you, that's a reflection on them. And you see, if those 20 people that you have in your life all have expectations of you, they're all coming from a different perspective. They all have different upbringings. They all have different ideas. They I doubt that all 20 of those people voted for the same political party and all have the same religion and the same, values and the same beliefs and the same skill set, even if they have the same religion and the same political beliefs. Do they all have the same skill set? So we've got to take a step back because what's happening with these expectations is a projection. It's a projection from one person onto another. But we are constantly being faced with these. Your self-thought is going to diminish. It's like somebody having your brain and saying, this is what you need to believe. This is what you need to think. And when you take that on, if you start taking on all of these, now you may just take on one and it's a little bit in the office. I'm not saying that you don't have a brain, you're not thinking for yourself. But when you allow all of these expectations to become your own, it's a choice that you make. You're choosing that. And you're allowing them to set those expectations. So they're, in a way, they're making those decisions for you. They're thinking for you. So ultimately, you start to become disconnected with who you are. And what we want in order to have that power play we talked about in the beginning, because I want you to go out and face the day and be powerful, be strong. And how do you do that? You stand in your true, authentic self. That is where we want to be. So the way that we do that is you need to connect to who are you? You've got to know these things. Sun Tzu says, know thyself and win all battles. Well, he actually says, know thyself and thy enemy and win all battles. But know yourself. And we talk about this a lot on the show. We talked about different ways and, to connect to yourself, to understand who you are. You've got to know that person. and it takes getting quiet. So, first, it's acknowledging. You've got to acknowledge what is happening. Are expectations coming into your space? I'd encourage you to just think about this here for a second and say, what kind of expectations does my boss have on me? What maybe you own the company. What kind of expectations do people have on me? My clients. What kind of expectations to the board of directors? What kind of expectations do people or my family, my friends? There are always going to be expectations. So first, it's just acknowledging, where do they exist in your life? And you're trying to live up to something that is set for you. Okay. And let's talk about how we manage and let go. First of all, I'm not here to say, let go of all expectations. They all suck. Screw you. We don't need to have expectations. I beat to my own drum. That's not it. That's not the answer. Because there are some valid expectations, like if you have a job or if you have, let's say you have a deliverable at your work, it's due on this date. If it's a reasonable expectation, okay, that's very important. If it's a reasonable expectation, the expectation is that you get it done on that date. So if that date is reasonable, then you get it done on time. Your boss, your client expects things to be done on time. But how do you know if it's even reasonable? Well, kind of, it's a project management plan. You start to look at all the different things that are involved in that. And then you look and say, okay, all right, well, I need to have this. I need to have this. I need to have this in place. This is going to take me this much time, this much time, this much time, this much time. And then you see where the tentative end would be. Maybe give yourself a little bit of extra wiggle room. This is how long it will probably take. Does that meet expectation? Whatever date was given to you? If yes, then yeah, it's a reasonable expectation. It makes sense. You can see it on paper. But if not, then what would you do next? You would say something, right? This is not reasonable. I cannot do what you are looking for me to do in 24 hours. This is going to take 3 weeks. And this is why. You would have that. I would hope that you would have that conversation before you committed to something, right? I mean, that it seems fair. And this is exactly what we need to be doing across our life. But it is reasonable to have expectations. It's reasonable to expect that there is a deadline, right? It's reasonable to expect that, you'll probably want to have dinner at some point. There's just things in our lives that are going to happen. But we've got to look and say, is that deadline, is what's being expected reasonable? So you have to be prepared to have that discussion with yourself, with others. So it's acknowledging, what are the expectations, and then looking at your life and saying, do they reasonably map up? And as you start pulling the layers apart and looking under the covers, you have to know yourself. So the same things that impacted everyone else's expectations on you, their values, their beliefs, their morals, their past experiences, their opinions, you need to know those about yourself. So when you see an expectation, look at it as data. We get so emotional about things sometimes. Let's just start to look at life more as data points. Okay? This is what they want from me. This is what they expect. This is what they want me to do right here. Okay. Have I ever even done this before? What would it take for me to want for me to get this done? Is this something I even want to do? Does it align with my beliefs? How about my values? We talked about values last week. Go back and listen to values. If I think we talked about that on Friday. No, on Thursday. Go back and listen to it last Thursday. What are my values? Do they align with this expectation? And when you start to feel dissonance, when you start to feel that this isn't true and authentic to who I am, this is when having those conversations, just like you did with your boss who said, hey, you have 24 hours to build the biggest system we've ever asked for. And you said, 24 hours, are you crazy? I'm going to absolutely need more time than that. And here are the reasons why. But you would need to stand up for yourself. If you are not standing up for yourself, then people will continue to pour on top of you, pour rocks, pour rocks, pour more rocks on top of you. And all of a sudden, you're going to be buried. So you need to write this, and I would suggest you write this down. Put this on a Post-it and put it on your mirror so that you see it every morning. Be bigger than what's happening around you. You've got to be bigger. Remember, we've talked about how these are just little scratches. It might not feel good for somebody to have an expectation and you not feel like you can add up to that. But first of all, you've got to be bigger. You got to say, hold on, something's not right here. I'm going to be the bigger person and talk about this. I know you have an opinion based off of your past, but this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, or that doesn't align with me, or this isn't what I want. And you have to have that real conversation of whatever it is. And by the way, you don't really owe anybody anything. This can just be an internal dialogue that you have with you. But it doesn't hurt to have conversations with other people so that they understand, because they're thinking, I'm right. I could do this before. I expect everybody else to do this. So be comfortable, and you'll know if it feels like a good conversation to have with that person. But communication, we know, is the biggest reason why people get divorced. If we just had a little better communication in relationships, whatever type of relationship that is, your relationship with your boss, your relationship with your spouse, your relationship with your kids, if you were just able to talk a little bit more, could you imagine the impact that that would have? So if it's an appropriate conversation to say, hey, look, I know you have this expectation, but this is where I'm at. I'm sure I will get faster at this, but to expect it to be done in 24 hours is not realistic. And this is why. For you to have that expectation on me for this, it just doesn't align with my beliefs. And so I'm sorry, I'm not going to move forward. You have to be bigger than whatever is happening in your life and put yourself as number one. And I know that it can feel odd, but you've got to acknowledge it and you have to speak up for yourself. So be bigger than the solution. Remember, when somebody has an expectation on you, that's on them. That's on them. And there could be absolutely valid points. You've got to have the common sense up here, and you have to know yourself to think through it. And if things aren't making sense, sit down with this other person or talk to a mentor. Find another person that you trust and have the conversation with them and say, hey, look, I'm just kind of batting this around, and this is why this doesn't feel right for me. But just because somebody else has an opinion doesn't mean they're wrong. It doesn't, because it's right for them. And we have to remember that we're all coming from different perspectives, and it has worked for us. And maybe you'll learn something from that other person. But maybe you need more practice before you can get things to that speed. Or maybe you need to, there's some things that you need to do. So you need to be honest with yourself of where you're at. And remember to look, and we're going to end with this. Ask yourself, what can I do? Versus, what do I want to do? Sometimes we want to do things and they're not really realistic. So when we're looking at expectations, remember the can versus want because they're different. It's that whole sometimes people are like, you want a cookie? And I'm like, I want that, but I don't need it. There's a difference. So, what can you do versus want? Make sure that you're clear about those. So, when you see that there is a difference, communication, getting honest with yourself, standing up for yourself, because you are the only one that can stand up for you. No one else can do that. So, that was a lot of information today. I would encourage you to go back and listen to it. I didn't want to talk about any fluff in the beginning. We just jumped right on in today because there was so much content to cover. But remember, expectations are on other people, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn from them. It doesn't mean that they're not valid. And it doesn't mean that, yeah, they're probably right. You have to do the internal work to do the assessment yourself. Don't let yourself slip into resentment by not having that honest conversation with you. Have that first and then go from there. All right. This is Jen Sugarmeyer, your host of Mindset in the Morning. If you've not yet hit that like button, if you've not yet hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do so. And if you want to know when we go live every single day, make sure that you hit that bell so that you get a notification when we are going live. So I will see you back here, same time, same place today. Go out, be powerful, think about those expectations and have those real and honest conversations with yourself. I love you and I will see you here tomorrow. Cheers.